bringing to you my greatest excitement as I now launch the dream that I've been wanting to bring to you all for such a long time. My first podcast, Slaying the Dragon by Elizabeth Allen from Empowered Alchemy, as we celebrate, commiserate, empathize with compassion, raw, wild and real journeys of our soul struggling to get through this human life on Mother Earth during the times of confluence and change. But you know that you have the tools to navigate your highest self-purpose. You know that you are now bringing towards you self-care as you now have the ascension strategies in place to own and honor your own truth and share your story with others, to give them the courage and the strength to know that if you can share one tool with someone else, you are making their day so much easier and so much more rewarding. Hi, Babula Clement, astrologer. I'm so happy to welcome you here today to my podcast, Slaying the Dragon, with Elizabeth Allen from Empowered Alchemy. This conversation, this chat, it's raw, wild and real. It's unedited. And if at any time I feel that we're going down into that dark night of the soul and we need to just hold space, is it okay if I get you to just hold space for yourself? For me, if I get triggered, and for anybody watching this, that this is not about the trauma and going into the trauma. It's about our movie, and you are the lead actress in your movie, as everyone else is in their own movie. And when we go into that movie, it's a series of events. And I guess what's inspired the dark night of the soul is the hero's journey and that call to action. But our initiation, that test, that time when our world fell apart. Ooh, let's breathe it in. And so I would love you to begin, Babula, with your name. It's an interesting name and it clearly has a story. It's clearly the lead actress in your movie.
Yeah.
Would you like to share how your name came about?
Yes, I'm very happy to. It is a major part of my story, and it was back many years ago when I was turning 30 in the famous Saturn return.
Ooh.
I didn't fully understand at the time,
Yeah.
but I was married with 2 young children and was deeply unhappy. And I know many women, not all, but many women understand that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just deeply unhappy, and I couldn't really fully understand why, because I appeared to have everything, the husband, the children, the house. And I was so unhappy. I was quite depressed. I was really struggling. And one day the thought arose, it kind of came into my consciousness, I don't want to be in this marriage anymore. And it shocked me. Just once it had finally come to the surface, I couldn't push it away again. And because then I didn't know what I was going to do. So it took me 2 years of struggling with that idea and that reality. And it just kept getting stronger and stronger. I thought, what it was, Elizabeth, it was this very strong, it's like the words came so clearly to me one day. This isn't my life. This can't be my life. This can't be it. Surely this is not what my life is.
So you started questioning
where
you were at, that perfect place, like, going along, life is perfect. And then all of a sudden you started questioning
That's right.
what you thought was perfect. Why am I
Well,
so unhappy when my work, when you're starting to question, why
That's-
am I feeling this? And our role of being the wife, the mother, and splitting up a family, it's a big issue, isn't it?
very big.
How
And
did you navigate that? What were your tools you
I
used at
knew
that
that
time?
I was unhappy, and I knew that it wasn't perfect, but on the outside it looked perfect.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
It's a
But
veneer, it's mask, isn't
for
it?
me, it wasn't. On the outside, it looked like
Yeah.
fantastic. So all I could do is I just kept staying with it and staying with it and
Yeah.
struggling in it and struggling in. And that was probably the strongest. I've had dark nights of the soul, a number of them, as I'm sure most people have,
Yeah.
but this was the big one
Yeah.
for me back then, because one day, oh, I love that there's a
Please
dog.
excuse my dog, Oscar.
I love that there's a dog with us. You know, one day he walked into the room and I looked up, and in a moment I knew it was over. I knew it was done. And the next day I packed up and moved out.
Wow.
It was such a
With the two
powerful,
children.
yeah, it was a powerful, powerful moment. And of course, very, very hard for him. And I do absolutely want to say at this point, he was and is a good man, and we still are friends, and we still all get together at Christmas and do
Wow.
and do all of that.
That's beautiful.
It's more that there was this knowing in me that this wasn't my life, and I didn't know what my life was. I had no clue of what was going to happen next. So I was literally stepping into something completely unknown. It was a completely empty space. I had no idea what was going to happen next. So it took me 2 years to come to that point of absolute certainty that I cannot stay here one more day.
Yeah. How
And
old were you when you got married? Can I ask?
We got together when I was in my early 20s. Right. Yes. And, you know, looking back, it was really clear to me that I was very young, very naive. I was quite an innocent, naive young person in many, many ways. I have to say, for which I'm eternally grateful, I've never been physically or sexually abused or harmed. So I have so much gratitude about that. But there was a hole in me, you know, there was an emotional, empty hole that I was trying to fill up, you know, from the outside. You know, this man was going to fill up my hole. Well, he didn't, and the hole just seemed to get bigger and bigger. And so it was an act of tremendous courage on my part to take that step, because my family all thought I was mad. What, you know, how could you possibly do this?
And why could you leave everything if life was perfect?
That's right. Friends couldn't understand it. But I do remember I had a conversation with one of my sisters, and she's a lovely soul, and was trying to explain it to her. She said, I don't understand. I'm trying to understand. And I looked at her and I said, I feel like I'm dying. And it must have been something in the way I said it. She just went, oh. Like she received
your soul, wasn't it? Your soul was in a very unhappy place.
Exactly.
And you probably would have got ill or, you know, sick with disease or had an accident if you'd stayed in that relationship.
That's right.
I do believe our energies bring towards us, you know, what it is that we're feeling and what we're focusing on. And so in that deep, dark place, how did you navigate your way out of that?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because
the call to action.
I had no plan at all.
How can you have a plan when you don't really know what you're doing?
See, all I knew was that I had to go.
Yeah.
When that moment of total clarity came, I had to act on it. It's like I had no choice. It was like life just...
Well, it became clear. The clarity, you got more and more clarity. You knew that you felt like you were dying, and you probably knew unconsciously that if you stayed there, that's what would happen. We have an innate need for survival.
That's right.
So instead of just surviving, how did you step into your call to action to answer that? Because there was an initiation journey that followed. Life is not a bed of roses, is it? It's not violets and roses, as they say. There's challenges.
Yeah, life is
challenges that you faced as you.
Well, what happened was very quickly life stepped in and things started to happen.
And it does.
And it wasn't coming from me. It was me responding to things that were happening, and things started to move really fast. And I've since realized when I look back, and I say this to people a lot, but my experience was I had to find the courage to say yes to me. And then it was though life said, okay, she's ready, let's go, we're moving, we're doing this, right? And that was the call, but I had to take that step. Without me doing it, all the rest that followed would never have happened. I'm certain of that. So what happened, I'd been dabbling a little bit in astrology, just was interested. I had been since I was really young, a teenager. I was very curious about it. And I happened to see a flyer back in the day when advertising happened with flyers plastered all over shop windows and so on. I saw a flyer for an astrology workshop, a weekend up on the Sunshine Coast, and I was living in Brisbane. And I thought, well, that looks interesting. And I decided to book in and go. Again, very innocent, had no clue what was about to happen. Well, what happened was phenomenal. The astrologer who was running this weekend was a very powerful, he's no longer with us, but he's a really powerful.
Who was it?
Being a man called Alia Griffin. He was
okay.
Astrologers in Australia all know Alia.
Okay.
Very strong character and a powerful being, an amazing man. And this was a very powerful workshop. It was quite experiential. I got more than I bargained for. And
don't we ever, when we answer our calling and we don't really know what we're being called into action for, it's amazing how the power just takes us forward, doesn't it? It's like the snowball just gathers more snow and you can't stop it from rolling down the mountain. Nothing.
Exactly. I was picked up and carried.
Beautiful. And you went. You had no choice.
And I had the most extraordinary time, like this huge emotional release, and because it was quite experiential and a lot happened on that weekend. And he, by looking at my natal chart, said, oh, no wonder, this is happening and this is happening. You need to work with this.
I can't relate to that at all, can I?
That's right. So, he was amazing. He said, you need to work with this. And what I would suggest you do is do breath work, rebirthing. And he said, I know someone. He said, contact me when you get back home and I'll give you the details. Well, it turned out he actually followed up on it himself. Next thing, I get a call from this woman who runs these rebirthing workshops down in Lisbon.
Wow, he took action for you.
That's
an unusual thing to do.
Life literally just picked me up and took me. And so very innocently, down I went to this weekend workshop, and I came back not the same girl. It was phenomenal. And it literally just blew me open. And from that point in that workshop, so much happened. But one of the things that happened was that I came across an Indian guru, because some of the people in that were with this particular Indian guru. So it was the astrology, the rebirthing, and this Indian guru that all happened in quick succession.
Wow.
Very soon after I left my marriage.
Wow, that is a call to action, isn't it?
It really moved very fast. And before I know it, I have a new name. I'm wearing.
How did it come about?
Well,
how did you choose Babula? What does it mean?
Well, I didn't choose it. So, well, the guru did. And what happened after a few months of struggling with this idea of, oh, no, that's not for me. I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. Becoming, a follower of a guru. And yet I was reading a book of his and I would just cry. It was like he was speaking to me in a way I'd been longing for all my life. And then he started coming in my dreams.
Wow.
And then I got really, really, really sick with glandular fever, I think it was. I was in bed for like 2 or 3 weeks. I was so sick.
Mm.
And he just kept coming in my dreams and smiling at me.
Wow.
And one day, it's like I could see him in the room. It was like a presence. And I don't claim to be psychic at all, but it's like I knew he was there just smiling. And one day, and I just went, okay, I surrender, you've got me. And I got out of bed, and within days I was well. I was no longer sick.
Wow.
And everything moved at lightning speed. So it was the most phenomenal time of my life. Huge astrological transits were going on in my chart, which then I didn't fully understand. Of course, I do now.
Mm.
And the name came through him.
Wow.
And it stayed with me. You know, it's just, it meant a great deal to me, and it stayed with me.
And what does it mean?
It means ecstasy.
Wow.
And
That's
it was
exciting.
And that was like a calling, you know, it was a calling. And I often smile when I think about it, because it's a journey through the agony and the ecstasy.
That's right.
So the shadow, the opposite side of it shows up as well, of course, you know.
Of course, it's always the light and the dark, the yin and the yang. We can't have the light without the dark. So your world had to fall apart.
Yeah.
Really, literally.
Oh, it did.
In every way, for you to release ego at its greatest level, or close to its greatest level, for the light to actually start to come in. And you called, you actually did answer that calling, and you stepped into the light.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't have been a smooth journey either. That was like a more initiation, call to action.
And of course, you know, family and people are all thinking, by God, she's lost her mind. You know, what's going on?
And they're quick to judge, aren't they? Because they don't know what's going on, and they can't understand or see it from your perspective. And they're not even able to ask the questions to get a deep understanding, because they're so blocked with their own mindset that they can't hear what you're saying. So there's a real dissonance happening with you and your family.
Yes, and I do understand it, because what I was doing was very unusual. What was happening to me was very unusual and quite extreme from their perspective.
Yeah.
You know, radical and extreme. For me, I've never felt so alive in my life. You know, it's like
ecstasy. It's like happening. There's an energy, isn't there? There's a life force, movement and change. It's like the butterfly is like being squeezed out of the chrysalis.
Well, it was, because that, you know, it's, and what I've learned since, and I'm sure you relate to this, you're doing these podcasts, so you do, dark nights of the soul, if we can stay with it and go through it, always lead to the most extraordinary openings, no matter how long it takes. So for me, the dark night was a good solid, well, it was a bit longer, but the real intense part of it was those 2 years of really suffering and struggling, you know, in a dark place and not knowing what I was going to do. And my husband, he couldn't hear me. And I understand that. He couldn't. I was trying to explain what was happening to me and why I was so unhappy. And I understand he couldn't.
Well, it was a dissonance. A cognitive dissonance is when they can't see you, they can't hear you, they can't feel you. And because, if you like, you're operating like a radio bandwidth, and anything outside, and that's a frequency, I believe, you know, you might go up and down a little bit, but, you know, it's operating within a bandwidth. So people outside of that bandwidth are not able to tune in to your frequency. So the dissonance is happening. When we have that cognitive dissonance, they can't understand you. They can't get what you're saying. And because they're not in the frequency of the bandwidth. And so I guess that's how, when our world starts to fall apart, you would have noticed that your friends also started to drop away, or, you know, relationships with your family became different, because your bandwidth is operating really strongly on this frequency,
Mm.
and they're not able to tune into you anymore, and you're not feeling listened to or heard or seen. So you feel shut down. You feel that you don't have a voice. You're not feeling understood. And it takes time, I think, to navigate the light force in our own bandwidth, because there's a loneliness in that period of time as well, isn't there?
I was
And an
going to say that.
isolation, and we feel that we're alone and we're on our own. And in a lot of ways, I think we are. Only we can do it.
That's right.
But we need a friend, and we need to meet a tribe, and we need to reach out and connect to a tribe of like-minded souls, that even if it's just one person to help us. Did you find that there was a mentor at that point?
Well, this guru and the whole community around him was like,
oh,
you see,
and wasn't that an important part of your journey?
Phenomenal. There are many people in that. I mean, I've moved on, as we do, and been through many other stages since then of evolution, but there are still many people that I'm connected to from way back then. I mean, we're talking, 40 years ago this happened. So the dark night of the soul is a lonely place, and I love that you call it slaying the dragon. And I was thinking about that this morning, that what I understood then and continue to understand, for me, the dragon is fear.
It's the monster, and when we can learn to make friends with the monster, and we learn to look the lion in the eye or the dragon in the eye, or ride the dragon, make peace with the dragon, and we become friends with the dragon, we're becoming friends with our own shadow. And I think when we can do that, real transformation happens, doesn't it? And we become on a higher level of what our soul purpose, our call to action really was. So how did that part of your life play out for you? How did you navigate that journey with your mentors, your gurus, finding you?
It's like a whole new world opened up, and really it was a world that was waiting for me. And I understand why back in the marriage I felt like, this isn't my life, this can't be my life, because I had a knowing on a soul level that there was something completely different ahead of me, but I couldn't see it back then. And it's so interesting to me that I felt like this isn't, like I was looking ahead. If I stay in this situation and projected forward over the years to stay in that marriage, what would it look like? And it was just a deadening feeling. And it was like I chose life, and slaying the dragon was slaying the fear that might stop.
That's exactly right.
Old step.
Yeah. And how did that play out for you? What was the next chapter in your book or in your marriage?
Well, I was very much immersed in that world for about 10 years.
Wow.
And what an adventure that was.
And where did that take you?
Well,
10 years, it's a decade, it's a lifetime.
Yes, it took me I lived in Fremantle for a while, in Sydney and Brisbane and so on, moving around a lot. I was doing a lot of personal development and healing and therapy and emotional release work. Like, it was a really powerful 10 years of deep inner, and
we really can't do that journey on our own. We do need people, mentors, teachers. And I don't think we should ever just have one trainer or one teacher. I think we need to have a team, because we don't want to just do it their way. Otherwise, we're going to just become their clone and make all of their mistakes. So we need to make our own mistakes and get our own healing. And we are an eclectic, mishmash, aren't we? We're bits and pieces of lots, and maybe that's where astrology comes in too, because there's so many squares. And when you were explaining that to me, it made so much sense of my journey. And when you added light to my journey, I could get clarity on why things were happening. And you can also start to see an end in time, or a lightening off, or maybe it's, when the seasons, it's time to plant, and with the moon, it's time to plant. But when you go into astrology, it gives a whole new depth to that. And in that 10-year period, that would have completely changed who you were. So how did you cope with going back to your old world, your old friends, your old family? Did they recognize you, or did they say, "What, you've changed"?
Well, there was a certain level of acceptance, and I'd been learning through all the meditation and healing work that I'd been just so immersed in. Was like, I can only describe it as coming back home to myself, and that, of course, is ongoing. That continues to this day.
It never stops, does it? Once you start, that's it.
Coming home, knowing who I am, coming home.
Yeah.
And in that process, the more we are able to be at home in ourselves, we become less concerned about what other people think, or
100%,
or that they might be offended, or not that be offensive or anything, but it just turned out to not be a major problem, actually, surprisingly enough. I didn't have any really major dramas. My parents, bless them, they were really good. They tried to be accepting. They couldn't understand, and I couldn't expect them to understand. But and I had a couple of sisters who were very open, a couple maybe not so, but a couple who were very open and never tried to shut me down. That they kind of weren't like me, but they were, at least there was enough love there for them to kind of keep,
and they could accept you for who you were. Exactly. And I think acceptance is a powerful state, isn't it? When we feel accepted, we no longer need to apologize for who we are.
That's right. So it is an ongoing process, of course. And as many, as another spiritual teacher after this period used to say, and I always remember this, I've had quite a journey with spiritual teachers. It seems to be my journey. He used to say things like, one thing you can be sure of, there'll be many twists and turns and dramas in the story. And that's true for everybody.
100%. Life is never a straight line.
Never.
It'll take you on a navigation, on a path. And I think it is our journey, not the destination, when we actually explore the journey. Because if we come in fear and don't take action, and we shrink to play small to keep everyone else happy, like you found in your marriage, that you felt like you were dying from the inside. So your call to action took you into a whole new segue forward into your authentic self.
That's right. And nothing was ever the same since.
No,
it was truly a death and a rebirth.
100%.
So in my work as an astrologer, I find that through those experiences of my own life, and you relate to this as a therapist too, I find myself coming from a place of wanting to support and encourage other people, mostly women, to be true to themselves and to follow their own heart, even when it gets really scary. Because it does get messy. To do. It gets messy and scary.
It does. When our world falls apart, it's not clean, it's not pretty, it gets messy.
That's right.
But it gets messier if we stay there and don't take the action as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
And, there's still, of course, in the ongoing process of life, there's been other messy bits and so on. And there's been dips and valleys. And, I remember one period of my life, a couple of periods of my life, I'd have the thought of, I was being really miserable and unhappy and just literally wanting to die, always knowing I wouldn't, because I think the spirit in me is too strong to take that kind of step, and I know that it's not a solution. You've
got to do it again next time.
It's
if you
just
don't
not
do it now, you might as well do the best you can in this life. Right. Because if you don't do it in this life, there's another life. And because I do believe our soul is eternal, it's only the physical body that's the container that carries the soul, and we are the vessels. So when we hold our own light to the best of our ability in our container, in a safe place, we have to answer our calling. We have to follow our soul purpose. We have to live our life with passion for our own truth. If we don't, we're shrinking our soul, and we're telling our soul that we're not enough.
That's right.
And that's what I believe is what creates illness and disease or accidents.
That's right. We are here to expand the light, but that includes
working in the dark.
Those journeys.
Let's dance with that dragon. That's right.
Absolutely. And in astrology, of course, it's beautiful because all the planets in our solar system, they all hold different archetypal energies. So there is particularly one planet that represents that energy of the dark underworld and the underbelly.
Is that Pluto?
That's Pluto.
Ah,
And so, of
the
course,
shake-up.
and Pluto was a major, major player at that time, way back 40 years ago. That was one of the main activations. And
So 40 years ago was in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. Is that when you're
no, it was actually in the early 80s.
80s? I'm only 20 years out. I've lost.
I know, that's
I
fine.
was an artist, not a mathematician.
Right, that's right. That's right. No, it was in the early 80s. And
That's
yeah.
right.
So, you know, it's a beautiful thing that there's all these different energies that are at play in our life all the time, every single day.
Absolutely.
And all the different stages of our life. Yeah. And it's a great guide and help. And I'm just so grateful. I could not be more grateful to have that in my life for so many reasons. It's given me a lot of freedom, a lot of insight. You know, I've been able to meet the most extraordinary people, yourself included, you know, through my work. And just understand things so much more, you know, on the small micro level to the big picture, because boy, are we going through a big time on planet Earth.
Well, we are, and we're heading towards, they say, the age of Aquarius is the golden age. And the more light we bring in, the more dark we will have to work with, because we can't have the light without the dark. It's the yin and the yang. We've talked about that. So how do you see the next 10 or so years playing out? You've got another decade to look forward to. What do you feel is going to happen in your world and in the world around us?
Well, over the next 3, 4, 5 years, there's some big movements with the planets. A number of very slow outer planets, slow-moving outer planets are going to be changing sign, all in a sequence, sort of one after another, which is pretty phenomenal. And I think, given the context of everything that's going on, we are in for a bit of a bumpy ride.
And how can people navigate that? Is there any
Well, we're already in a bumpy ride, aren't we?
We are.
We are. And I see it as it's a double thing. Things are very intense, and I think they're going to continue to be intense for a couple of years at least. But at the same time, parallel to that, the light is growing and growing and getting stronger and stronger, and more people are, you know, awakening to the truth of who they are, to the truth of how this world actually does operate and function in the shadow realms. And it's what you said before. I think as the light grows, the dark pushes right up against it.
Well, it's going to want to stop us from getting to the light, isn't it?
Exactly.
You know, that's the role. Well, you know, if we're going up higher, something's going to try and come and keep pulling us down.
Exactly, and prevent that from happening.
What's your advice or guidance with that, you know, as an astrologer?
Well, I would say everyone's on their own individual journey with this.
Right.
And
they've chosen that journey to navigate during this time of confluence and change, haven't they?
And one thing I'm noticing everywhere, not only through my work, but with friends and everywhere, it seems to me in the last 2 years or so, it was particularly noticeable last year, everyone I meet is going through huge, critical stuff.
Yeah.
In their own lives, in their life circumstances, in their inner world, like major big things. Like people got to the end of last year just exhausted.
Exactly. And I did too. I felt exhausted, and I couldn't just celebrate a new year on the 1st of January. I very rarely ever do, to be honest. I feel like I'm more aligned to the Chinese New Year.
Yeah.
And it takes me time to start cleaning out. But like you even mentioned, our birthday is actually our new year, isn't it?
Yeah, our own new year.
Would you like to add some light to our birthdays?
Yeah, so on our birthday, the sun returns back to the position it was when we were born. So it's a solar journey, a sun journey. And the sun represents, both esoterically, spiritually, and in astrology, our core sense of self and identity. And it's a body and a being from which we draw light and vitality. And I think it's very connected to source and source energy. Very powerful. But in terms of our human life, whatever sign our sun is in, this is our path in this lifetime. You know, when people say, what's my path and my purpose? The whole chart tells us a story, but it's the sun and the sun sign primarily, the house it's in and the other planets connected to it, that tell us a story of our journey. And I feel like everything comes back to the sun sign. Whatever else is going on in the chart and in our life, it's always finds its way back to the sun sign. What am I learning as this sun sign? How am I growing? How is the light growing? And then as our light grows, what does light do? It has to shine and give back. Right?
It has to reflect. It's like the mirror, if you like. There's a light source, a beam of light that's giving back to you a power, a sense of regeneration, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. And so we have to give the gifts back to life that we've learned and developed and discovered through our own journey of growing the light in ourselves. You know, it must be shared with others through the energy of that sign, you know.
Maybe that's what calls us into action to do the work that we need to do. Our own dark night of the soul gives us the gift to be able to share, to help others learn, to be able to help them make their life easier, I suppose, isn't it?
Yes. And I think to stay with that, you know, metaphor of the sun, when we're in a dark night of the soul, and as we said earlier, there can often be a few of them throughout our life, but there might be one really important one. It's like someone's turned the light of the sun off and we're lost in the dark until, I think the key here, Elizabeth, is until a moment comes when we're able to stand up and say yes to ourselves. Because the struggle in the dark night of the soul can often, I think, be to do with, I'm not really doing what I really want and need to do for whatever reason. So when we start to get up off our knees and say, you know what, I'm going to follow my own path and whatever that means.
Yeah.
And it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
The light starts to come back in. And it's often a very courageous and bold step. It
absolutely
takes
courage. And it's not easy, is it? You know, to stand up and, you know, and also too, society, our family, our cultures, our religions have all got us to, you know, conform to their belief systems so that they can control us.
That's right. That's right.
And when we actually start questioning that, and they feel that they can't control us, or we won't do what they want us to do because we can think for ourselves, that's a huge issue.
Huge.
And even in the last 3 years, that's been a massive issue with people questioning, you know, well, for what purpose, can I ask? And how do you show what you're doing is okay? Or the rejection of our loved ones and family if we have the courage to say, well, actually, that doesn't sit with me.
That's right. And stand out separately as an individual. And that's what, of course, what sovereignty is all about, which for me as an astrologer has so much to do with the sun.
And that's coming into play now with, you know, Alice Springs and the Aboriginal Indigenous nation, Australia, in our world as well. You know, sovereignty is now standing in to be challenging the status quo. And it's becoming quite obvious, even in the courts or with the police, when people say that we're sovereign, and we are all sovereign, but we've all believed that the law is there to protect us and we don't have rights. And now people are realizing we do have rights and we do have a voice. Is that a link to any planetary, you know, is that part of the change with Uranus and Pluto?
Yes, it absolutely is, you know, because this year, Pluto, the Lord of the Underworld, has, you know, it's been in Capricorn since 2008.
And when does that start to shift?
Well, this year,
There's a way forward.
2023 and 2024, Pluto begins to just dip his toes into the sign of Aquarius. So this year he'll be in 0 degrees of Aquarius for 3
So we
months.
really are coming into the age of Aquarius.
By the end of 2024, Pluto, this planet of tremendous power and death and rebirth and total transformation, will finally be out of Capricorn, which is a sign that, amongst other things, has got a lot to do with government and control and top-down control.
Is it also got something to do with the Earth ley lines that is really happening at the moment, and especially at the moment with Turkey and Syria, the trauma that, you know, so many people just like that, their whole world crumbles into ashes and despair and so much pain and loss. And we need to send love and light to people like that rather than more fear, don't we?
Yeah, so
if we keep sending fear to them, it's not helping them. We need to hold space and send light into the darkness. And that gives me goosebumps even acknowledging that.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a very critical time often when the slow moving outer planets are in the process of changing sign. And because they move so slowly, it can take them about 2 years to fully do it. So you get this crossover, and it's in that crossing over period. So with Pluto, it's this year and next year, things can get very, very intense because something's starting to really crack open, right? And that struggle.
When something cracks open, it's like the egg. And when the egg cracks open, it's new life, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. So it's, you know, it's both I think in many ways a very traumatic, difficult time, but in many ways it's also quite exciting. Because
you've chosen to live during this time, and with the tools of your navigational device, which is astrology, you've got a gift to help so many people now get a deeper understanding of who they are personally, to be able to step into their own authenticity, to love their own light, and learn how to work with the shadow. Not run away from it.
And that, exactly. And that is the way forward for every individual. And
so we all need to do our own work. We all need
right.
someone outside of us to help us do our own work.
Exactly.
We need different teachers or healers, mentors, you know, and do you think the world is becoming more spiritually awakened and aligned, or do you think it's breaking down into the dark? What do you think is happening with that? There's like an up and a down, isn't there?
I think both is happening. I think there's
I think so too.
breaking down and dismantling of old systems.
It's like the Tower card has to crumble.
Exactly.
Which really is Turkey. But when the Tower card crumbles, we can have in that darkness a beam of light piercing the shield to come through, and that's where miracles happen. We don't know how Turkey's going to play out for the world. There may be miracles of light coming through this, like a rebirth.
That's right. That's right. We don't know how that will unfold.
And life is easy in hindsight, isn't it? We can look back over the history pages of when the world's evolution shifted and changed. And we really are in a world of evolutionary change right now. And with the navigational devices you have as an astrologer, you can see this and plot this and help people form their own safe place to the best of their ability.
Yes. And to follow their own light. It's what you've been saying, as well as acknowledging the dark. We must
we can't run away from the dark. We can't pretend it's not happening. We can't turn a blind eye to it. But I do suggest we come away from mass media and a lot of the negativity and feeding the fear is only designed, I think, to lower our vibration. If we can just turn it off and watch selected things when we're wanting to watch or go to concerts, but we need to be more mindful, I think, don't we, of what we choose to bring into our world. And I close my eyes when I go into that space and put my hands on my heart, and I just go for what is of right heart action, what feels right to me. And I think our own need for light and health and happiness and peace and joy brings us back into our own center of our own truth. And it's hard to create change when we don't want our world to fall apart. And your questioning of your happy marriage, that everything was perfect. You had 2 beautiful children, a gorgeous husband, and a beautiful house. You had everything in your world, but your soul was
That's right.
shrinking away, feeling
Right.
that it was dying.
That's
and
right.
Now, with all of your life that you've been through, if you had the tools and the resources to be able to write the postcard from your future, that beautiful woman that you are today, and give that postcard as a beautiful story of empowerment to the baby, the inner child, Babula, what would you say to that little baby girl? What's your original name? Can we ask?
You can. It's Carol.
Carol.
O-L. Mm.
And so,
and you know, it's
an interesting name, because Carol they sing the carols to herald in a new light.
I know. And you know, I had an epiphany about that many years ago, when I discovered that, you know, if you look up meanings of names, I've always been fascinated by names and their meaning and their energy. I think they have great purpose. And one of the meanings that I read was that it was Song of Joy. And I love that, because
I think it's perfect for you.
Because it kind of fit the new name as well in many ways.
It does.
And it's a constant reminder to me through all the struggles and trials and tribulations, to remember that my essential nature is joy.
Absolutely. But it's the song of light.
That's right.
And it's the you know, to herald in the birth of a new day would be to sing the carols. That's what Christmas is all about.
That's right. And that celebration. And I feel that there is a very important message in everybody's name.
Absolutely.
And if people could really look into that and tune into that and feel into that and use it as a kind of a talisman also, and a reminder of, and I've got this theory, Elizabeth, I like to believe this. I think parents, I think a child comes into this life already with a name, and the parents just find it.
I totally agree with you.
I think it's already
I've
there.
often wondered why I made those decisions, and that brings us back to our soul contract. And
Yes.
and I guess you help people understand their soul contract.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's already there. We come in with it, you know.
Well,
and
it's a map, isn't it? A roadmap, or the
Yeah.
contract. Do you believe that we can actually rewrite the soul contract?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. And
Another question.
I'm wondering why we'd want to, really. My own
Well, I think it gets too hard sometimes, you know. It's been challenging for me, and I just think, gosh, I want to burn my soul contract. Do I have to keep, do I need, or is there a way of stepping more into the faith, to trust, to leave behind, you know, the challenges that are holding us back? And maybe it's a belief system that we need to change, rather than the actual contract. Burning the contract symbolically may actually release to the universe what we no longer need to carry, hold, and have.
Yeah, maybe.
To bring more light into the darkness. Maybe that's piercing the shield.
Maybe it is. I mean, I, like everyone, have had moments where I've just gone,
I can't do this.
What the hell was I thinking?
That's exactly right. I've asked that question 1,000 times.
That's right. And then on we go. And do you know what helps? Do you know what helps me a lot? Is I come back to really, really simple. Like I paint, as you do.
Yes.
And
that's one of your beautiful paintings behind you, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's gorgeous. Would you like to share briefly with that before we finish up as well?
Okay, well, there is a story to this painting. And I watched the interview you did with the beautiful Michal, who I've also met and known and done workshops with too, and she said something similar. This painting had another painting underneath it.
Most of them do for me. I start off with layers like the onion.
but I never felt connected to it. I'd kind of finished it, but I never felt, it was just like, there was never any juice in it for me, or I didn't really like it. And one day, it might have been about 2 years ago, I was going through an emotional storm, as you do, and I was really charged up, and I was like this.
Yep.
And I thought, I've got to move some paint, right?
I love that. Isn't that therapeutic? Art really is the best medicine, isn't it?
So good. So I grabbed this canvas because it's a nice big one. I needed to move my body and move paint.
Yep, absolutely.
I squirted out some paint onto a palette, and I put my hands in it.
Yep.
And Mikhail said something like this as well. She did it in a different way. She said she wrecked that painting many times. And I put my hands in this paint, and I just went on top of this painting in an emotional storm, and I just smushed and I used my whole body, and I made a big mess, had a ball, and I kept going, and I just kept moving paint in different colors, and it was a freedom to do whatever I wanted.
Yeah, but it really heals the inner child and gets rid of all of the angst and the stress and everyone else's belief systems. It's like you're ripping it off.
It was fantastic. And we all need these outlets.
100%. We absolutely do. It's my healing as well.
And what happened was the next day I walked into the room, and I just, you know what happens when you glance at a canvas? Yeah. And I just went, oh, and I saw her.
Wow.
I saw her face as clear as could be.
Yeah.
And and then the painting just painted itself. And she, to me, is a symbol of serenity, and the serenity that emerges out of those wild storms.
That's right. I love that.
Yeah, so it's a very meaningful painting to me, and I think she's one that will always stay with me, you know.
She will for as long as you need her to.
That's true.
And you can always have a scanned, and it may get a calling to go to another home.
That's true.
I used to feel like that. And then I stepped into not having that personal attachment. For one, I started to run out of room at home.
I know.
And I also felt it was selfish that I needed to share it, and I needed people to see my art. And instead of me feeling that I'm not enough and shrinking and keeping it just for myself, for my own healing journey, I've realized that art is my medicine to share with others. And so I think we get called into action in our own ways.
Yes.
And I think every person's journey is absolutely important, and you will know another twist and turn on your path if you get called into action to share any part of that process with others. You know what to do.
That's right. And I started doing painting parties for women, and
that's exactly what I'm saying.
That's right.
That's beautiful. I love that, Babula.
That's what made me think of it from what you were just speaking. And the whole motivation of them was for women to come together in a state of play and enjoyment, to learn some simple techniques, and they have a wonderful time, and they all go home with a few paintings.
And to even align it to their astrology, and to paint that dark night of the soul, to slay that dragon, to the initiation journey, which is not a bed of roses, and to be able to learn to conquer their own fear and make peace with the dark, so that they can get on that dragon and ride it into their starry night, into the black sky, the darker the sky, the brighter the light, the brighter the moon,
exactly.
The stars.
And we only see the stars because the sky is so black.
That's right. And we need to come away from the built-up environment with all of the lights out into the bush. I think that's why Mother Nature is so powerful. That's right. Have you been down to the beach, with the black sky in front of you, the black water in front of you, and that full moon or those stars? When we give ourselves space to immerse ourselves in the magic of what we have here on Mother Earth for free, we really come home to our soul and our truth, and we don't need happiness from outside sources. We have all of the tools and resources within us. We've chosen it. We've just got to learn to reconnect back, and you help people reconnect back with themselves. And I honor you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I think what you're just saying about nature is so important, you know, when we're in a state of despair, just to go and sit in the sunshine.
Well, yeah, to touch a tree, you know, to allow your hand to just connect with a tree and the heartfelt energies, or hug a tree. And I know, you know, it sounds very hippie, but there's very grounding and earthing and balancing, isn't it? And I think, you know, maybe the hippie doesn't come too far away from me and from
I think the hippies were onto something.
I think they were too, onto a few things.
That's right.
Darling, if you could share just one thing with anybody out there before we finish up, any guidance, advice, any words of wisdom that you would love to share.
Well, I think for me it all boils down to you know, trusting ourselves. Trust yourself, be true to that above all else. I think that's, I mean, years ago I remember I had this thought, what is it that I'm after? What is it that I want? What do I want? And the answer came so clearly. I want myself. Like, I want to know and be and live myself. And I think that's a big part of where I'm coming from. Is I'm so happy when I see people be true to themselves, just to be true to yourself. And that, of course, as we know, is a big, big journey.
Absolutely.
But, you know, those times when we're trying to be something for everybody else, and that is also a part of life, I know that. But when we get lost, when we lose ourselves, we can go down.
And so many people do lose themselves, and they need to learn to come back home, to do their own work, to connect to their own. When we were a baby, we were born absolutely perfect.
Yes.
And as we get older, that perfection is tarnished by the way we see ourselves through other people's eyes. And we need to recognize that they may not have done their work, and their projection onto us is a reflection of them.
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with us necessarily, but our soul's chosen these lessons.
That's right.
We have to learn. And with your tools and, you know, tools of many people around our world, when we can learn to come back home to our truth and rewrite our neural pathways. And I do think that programming helps rewrite our soul and our heart and every cell in our body. You know, we are connected. We are one.
That's right. We absolutely are. And that's the way forward into the new age, is for each individual to find their own authentic true self. And you imagine the collective of humanity when everyone's being true to themselves.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's a truth. There is a truth in that, isn't there? And when we all come from our own innate truth and with integrity.
That's right.
You know, and not needing to be someone hoping for everyone to like us, but to be true to ourselves regardless. And it's a lonely, horrible journey at times. I've had many a broken heart because my belief and my values hasn't aligned with the ones that I love the most.
Yes.
And I recognize that I can't shrink my soul to keep everyone else happy. I have to learn to hold my own light and make friends with that shadow. And maybe we are here as teachers and as healers, you know, call us the crazy ones, but we are the change makers who do help evolution move forward and who help people come into their own authenticity. And I think that's what this is all about.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Yeah. What a life.
No one said it was easy though, darling.
No one said it was easy. But really, I also celebrate this amazing, magnificent life, except when I'm in those moments of, oh, God, why?
We all need Doona days, and we all need a friend, and we need a like-minded friend with our tribe, and we need to learn to recognize, to let people go that are holding on, that are not doing their own work. We can't be the rescuer. Otherwise, we will always become their victim. We've got to learn to hold our own light and have boundaries, and our values help hold our boundaries in place. So I think when we do that, but again, it's a process of learning, isn't it? And it's not just an overnight journey. Your life has taken you from when you were 30 to where you are today, when your world was falling apart, when you were questioning. Everyone thought your world was perfect, but no, you were questioning your soul. It felt like it was dying. And now, is there any part of your life today that you would return back to that 30-year-old and give that 30-year-old the wisdom then?
It's such an interesting question. It's a good one for me to ponder. It might take a while, but
that's okay. You know what?
Yeah.
I guess I didn't, this is unscripted, it's unedited, but I think I will leave that with you and maybe with everybody out here watching, because life is easier in retrospect. And our parents didn't necessarily have the tools and resources that we needed at that age. Our family, we chose them for the lessons that we had to have, but there was something in us that got us to question that we needed more, that we weren't happy with just, a 9-to-5 job and living happily ever after. There was a call to action. You answered the call to action. I think life is an initiation journey. I don't think it ever stops. And enlightenment is probably when we have got all of our learnings and we've completed our soul contract and we say, thank you, I'm out of here, I've done the best I can and I've played 100%. And I don't think anyone can do any better than that.
No, absolutely not.
When we go with 100% peace in our heart and soul, then we can't do better than that.
That's right. And truly, more and more lately, I just have nothing but gratitude for all of it.
Exactly.
Even those really rough parts, and I had a few rough bits last year, but truly I'm so grateful for all of it, because each piece takes us to the next level.
It does. But I found last year was my hardest year. It was more challenging. And I think it was for a lot of light workers and healers and therapists, it was the world. I think we could feel the world. And all of a sudden, everyone was doing as they were told and being locked down. But then there was a feeling of displacement. And I think also, too, the way we were treated during that lockdown didn't just change. We saw our values. I think it goes back to our values. Our values changed. What was most important to us before even the fires. And then with COVID, we forget the fires were the prelude into COVID. And I think we need to go back to the fires, but the fires represent regeneration. Yes. And I was meditating last year about COVID, and I actually had gratitude for COVID because I felt that it brought people together on different platforms and people working from home or connecting through Zoom and, different technology platforms. And the world became smaller. We started to reach out to connect with our tribes through
new tribes have been coming together.
So our world has changed, and I think it's part of our evolution. And it's not a blame game of right or wrong. I think it's a part of a civilization shifting and changing. Our world's evolutions and civilizations have always changed throughout history. And it'd be interesting to see what the historians in 1,000 years' time write with the archaeological digs and the writings and the artworks and the music about this time on Earth during this time. And we're living it. So we can't see the woods for the trees at the moment. A fish can't see the water it's swimming in.
That's right.
We need to step into new fresh waters and be able to look back and see, oh, that was murky over there, or now we have more clarity.
That's right. That's right. I often wonder, if I come back again in 100 years' time, this world is going to look very...
It'll be how different is it from when we were children?
Oh, God,
to now. Absolutely. And look at the technology advancement. I remember the biggest mobile phone, and they were so expensive, those plans. I remember when my son was 13 and I started retraining at Sydney University, and I felt guilty going off, to leave him to get himself to high school. And I had the big mobile phone that cost me like $1,000 in phone calls because I was such a guilty mother and felt neglectful, you know. And then now everything's smaller and more compact. But I don't know. I think with technology, we've got to again learn the right and the wrong, the dark and the light, the
Yes.
black and the white. We've got to recognize that there's negative and positive with every aspect of every part of our
Everything.
life. And we've got to bring it into balance to the best that we can.
Yes, yes. Hallelujah.
I'm not on my pedestal at all, am I? Give me a pedestal in the park. What do they say? A soapbox in the park.
Well,
give me a podcast.
Yeah, but look, I love these conversations too. It's wonderful.
Darling, I'm sure that we will reconnect again. And if anybody has any questions or wants to reach out to you with the links that you've given me, they'll be shared on my on the podcast, and it would be great for everybody watching, I think, to not just comment on Facebook pages, but to comment on the Zoom, on the podcast link on YouTube. I think it's the way it grows with a bigger dynamic.
Yes.
More people around the world can see it, and I think that's the intention, to bring healing to humanity and open up borders and horizons with awareness. And the more awareness we have on different levels and ways of thinking, it opens doorways, and I think they're portals to a new world.
They are. And I love that you're doing this series, because I've been saying for years that everybody's life story is the most extraordinary.
It's so important. Movie. We all have a story.
But it's a movie
that.
Yes. And it's full of drama and like the most amazing stories about their life. And this is everybody's life story is amazing. It's so heroic. Honestly, it is so heroic coming to Earth and living this life.
It's a tough one. I sometimes wonder why we've done it, but anyway, we have. Let's make the most of it.
Exactly.
Love, darling, working with you and chatting with you,
darling.
With you. Thank you so much.
You're
and
so
I
welcome.
know that we'll get you back on here again, maybe at some point, to answer some questions on a public platform to help people navigate, you know, different times. If you feel that you need to come back on to help people find their way through a mess, I would love for you to, you know, reach out and have
Okay, wonderful. Yes, happy to.
I think everyone's journey is all part of our crazy path that we're walking.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you, beautiful.
Thank you,
beautiful
lovely
day, and I know we will have you back again soon.
Fantastic.
She's gorgeous. Bye.
Bye.
I am so honored to walk beside you as we support each other in connection and collaboration in our community.